dump or don't say a word. Move my head around like a startled bird. Can't do housework when I choose. When I win, I convince myself I lose. Fabric feels weird against my skin. I gotta hold my breath when I take out the bin. Can't go out cause it's too hot and bright. I can't sleep at night cause there's too much light. The bees in my brain won't let me speak. My thought process is quite unique. The mask comes off and now I'm weird. Everything is as I feared. Living in this world can be quite a chore. We've all had enough, but we still want more. Leave me alone, I don't want interference. Wait, no, mate, that's your autistic experience.
Hello and welcome to the Autistic Experience, your one-stop shop for neurodivergent news, commentary, general weirdness, and anything else that happens to cross our mind in the meantime. My name is Kieran, as always, joined by Chloe.
You are indeed.
Oh, that's good. Sometimes I forget. It's currently the 22nd of October, the date this goes out, so congratulations, you've made another one.
Another week.
Another week.
Yeah.
New episodes come out every Sunday at midday British time, and while you're not listening to this, which I've got to assume is most of the time, mathematically speaking, you can go follow us on Instagram at The Autistic Experience, and yeah, see what else we've got up there. All the news stories we talk about, we have references to up on there, so you can go and check them out yourself and draw your own conclusions. Also, another exciting little update is that I've started putting our episodes up on YouTube, which is a big old hassle.
Woohoo.
So if you're one of those people who like listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube for whatever reason you like, then you can go find us on there. Just search The Autistic Experience, either on regular YouTube or YouTube Music, and you should be able to find us, fingers crossed, if you search for podcasts, like The Autistic Experience podcast, or however these search terms actually work. So I think it's about time we got into the show proper and started up and started up with home news. Home news. Because you've been at work most of this week.
I have.
Haven't
Busy
you?
week
So-
at work, yes.
So it's
Riveting.
been fairly quiet on your side of things.
Riveting week at work. I made cannolis, that's it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And we've eaten all of them.
Yeah. The one thing I did this week.
However, for me, on Thursday evening, I attended the Manchester Publicity Association, or MPA, Awards.
Ooh.
Which was basically just this big media industry awards thing based in Manchester, hence the M in MPA. And I was shortlisted for the University Student Award.
Ooh.
Only because I entered myself, because that was how it worked. And for the life of me, I can't remember what I wrote on the application. This will seem a real tangent, but when they were announcing like the nominees for each award, they were showing, pictures of the people for the individual ones. And I was sat there like, I must have had to enter a photo. Which photo will I have done? Because the one I tend to use for most things now was taken at our university awards, which were after the deadline for applications shot. So I can't have used that one, which is a shame really, because I would have wanted that one used just because I was wearing the exact same thing.
Yeah, on a stage in front of a microphone.
Yeah. Yeah, but I was wearing the exact same clothes I wore for this thing. So my thought was, if I've got that photo up, then I would just point it at me and go, "It's me." But no, they used just a photo that I must have used, but I know that in previous applications to kind of awards thingies, I've used a photo of me basically wearing a poncho and a cowboy hat doing stand-up. So I was thinking, it could be that one. I've used that one before.
Oh.
and everyone else like has been using like professional like headshots against like nice bright things, and there's me in like a dingy uni room just pointing forward like with a poncho, cowboy hat and ukulele going like, yeah, if there's any visual representation of autism on show here, it's that. So Kieran, how did you know you were different? Well, I think it began when I first put the poncho on.
Yeah.
When I sent in the picture of me wearing the poncho. And everyone else just used a photo of them smiling at the camera.
Yeah, it's like spot the autistic.
Yes. Spot the difference.
Spot the different.
So I actually won that award.
Way!
So I got to bring a new award home for the shelf.
The count at 4, is that? I can see it there now.
Yeah, should be 4. Yeah.
A multi-award winner
Yeah.
on our hands.
Whoop, whoop, whoop. But still unable to get the work I really want to do because of obvious reasons. Because I can't network. Because it's too stupid.
Socializing.
Yeah. Boo, 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 boo. Like, on a serious point, which kind of does lead into what I wanted to kind of talk about. The idea was that, like, afterwards they had, like, an after party for kind of, like, networking and stuff. But, well, at that point, pretty much everyone else was pretty cronk, to use a technical term. But then also, like, I've been to media events which, you know, no one's been drinking at, but it's always been the same, that I go with the full intention of trying to talk to people and actually make some connections. But I end up just kind of sat on a table by myself, just feeling like mental corkscrews being kind of shoved into my temporal lobes. Because at the same time, I'm like, I want to talk to people. I need to talk to people. But my brain is also going, no, not happening.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Which doesn't help.
Yeah.
That's that. I think it's about time we moved on to our neurodivergent news section.
Bam, 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 bam.
Neurodivergent news.
Bam.
What we've got for you today is 2 quick stories and then 1 longer discussion that we actually recorded last episode, but it was far too long and far too spicy to include in that episode. Focus on the spiciness, though. It is a real good discussion, but we'll do a bit of an intro on it a bit later on. The first thing we're going to talk about is there's this Kickstarter that's been launched in the UK, which is the brainchild of an autistic kid. He's 10 years old, so he's ready to go off and catch Pokemon. He's launching this Kickstarter to make these sensory-friendly t-shirts for kids. And once again, it's one of these things where it doesn't come in adult sizes, but let's face it, that's not necessarily his thought process at the time being. It's not like the usual dinosaur-related pajamas that we look at and go, why don't these come in adult sizes? Well, we'll focus on this for the time being, shall we? But yeah, so this kid's name is Max, and the t-shirts he's designed are seamless, so they don't have those annoying seams. They don't have labels on. They basically just have like a sticker instead, so you can just peel that off for like washing instructions and whatnot. And then also one of the other things is that they've got those little pop things in like the seams of the t-shirt, so that you can just kind of go pop, 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 and kind of just keep your hands busy.
Yeah, and as he says when he describes it, you're not going to lose them.
No, that's true.
And he says it's a real pain when you lose your fidget toys. So
we watched the video that he's got as like the introduction. It's a 4.5 minute one shot, and you can tell that like his dad or whoever has got the script behind the camera. But then he just, as you said, it's like a similar energy to what I have. He just kind of reads part of it, and then just a thought takes over.
yeah,
And he just goes, I'm going to go this way for a bit.
he does come out with some zingers, to be fair to him, though, doesn't he?
Yeah, there's some actually pretty good jokes in there.
Yeah.
Which I could tell were not written.
Like this is a good kid.
Yeah, you can tell he's an intelligent kid.
Yeah. And I think this is a really, really cool thing to design, just to reduce all that irritation for kind of young autistic people, and also just give them something to fiddle with. And because there's a lot of times in schools and work, if you're older, that fidget toys aren't really tolerated very well.
No.
So if you've got just something that's fairly subtle and fairly hidden, work a lot better.
Yeah, I think especially in the school front, because a lot of sensory issues can come about with school uniforms.
Yeah.
For example, they're like really rigid and uncomfortable. I know, especially for me, having like the collars were really tight, and I felt like I was choking a lot of the time.
Yeah,
And like, labels and all sorts of different reasons that can, cause a lot of sensory overload, which can result in meltdowns and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't get away from that if you're required to wear the uniform every day. But maybe in that case, if you've got maybe one of the t-shirts just underneath it, that does provide a little barrier around you, so you don't necessarily have quite that same issue with like shirts and whatnot.
Yeah.
And also, you do have the little pop thing just to
Still
keep you a bit
accessible.
busy. Yeah. The project on Kickstarter is fully funded. It's reached about double its goal.
It's done so well. I mean, if they did them in adult sizes, I'd totally buy one, but...
Yeah. The pledging window actually closed on Wednesday. So it's been fully funded, and they, I imagine, will enter production at some point in the future.
Well, hey, adult sizes, please. Hear me, Max?
Get on it, Max.
Adult sizes. I'll be your first test customer. Hit me up.
You're not even a full adult size, are you?
No, I could probably get away with like a 16 plus. That's the biggest size they're doing. I'm only a bit, in fact, I'm not even taller than most 16-year-olds.
No, exactly. So
should be all right.
Might be able to get away with it. Our next story for you today is it was just a report of this event which happened in Toronto in Canada, which the reason I'm bringing it up is because my brother now lives in Toronto, so I thought it might be local news for him now. It was this partnership between GTAA, which I'm sure stands for something, Air Transat and Autism Ontario. They hosted an airport familiarization tour for autistic people and their families. So the idea is that we have mentioned on previous iterations of the podcast that going to an airport is really stressful, especially when you've got time constraints and everyone around you is stressed and angry and probably a bit drunk. So they kind of took autistic people and their families around the airport and just showed them how everything works, and like got into the airplanes and showed them kind of like, the cockpit and everything, and just gave them a bit of a tour around the airport just to, familiarize them so it wouldn't be quite as stressful when they needed to go there properly.
Yeah. Just when you add extra things in, like the noise and the people, you can kind of reduce the effect that the actual environment has on someone.
Yeah. And if you know where you're going within that environment, then it's a lot easier to ignore the people.
Yeah.
But as far as I can tell, I would definitely say these things. It said it will be held on an annual basis.
It also said, didn't it, that it was partially kind of an experimental thing to work with accessibility in airports.
But I'd say that's definitely one for expanding out just to other airports and other busy kind of transport hubs. Yeah. Just to provide, it's just that accessibility, and to provide it, to make things a bit easier and less stressful.
Yeah.
But good job, Toronto. Keep doing what you're doing. Okay, this next bit is that big, chunky, full spice discussion. We promised you, we recorded it last week, but it was far too interesting to pair up, especially with our discussion about all the ADHD waiting times and all that stuff. And
Typical.
especially that big old mental health discussion we had.
Oh, yeah.
So we kind of felt that, time-wise, we didn't want to fill out your entire day by including it then. But also, like, it was, two big, heavy topics,
Yeah.
like clashing back to back. Maybe not. So we decided to save it for this week, and you're going to listen to it now. So what it is, it's a discussion on this news article, which then kind of turns into a big discussion about ABA, which is a form of behavior therapy, mostly used in the US, but if you don't know anything about it, you will hear plenty about it in the next however long it edits down to.
Enjoy the ride.
Enjoy. All right, we're moving on to our final article of today.
Strap in, boys.
Now,
You thought that one was bad.
yeah, you thought that one was spicy.
I'm only just warming up.
Yeah. This article was put out on the 9th of October on Spectrum, which is kind of an autism news and research website. So, because we're both scientists, we read this, it's a journal review. So
Yes.
this is basically, it's kind of doing what we're doing now. It's condensing a published paper into readable format and like summarizing their points, because reading academic papers is like pulling teeth. It's
Awful.
But like, this isn't a review of scientific journal writing. Luckily. Luckily. Just bear that in mind. This is a review of a paper which was published.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you're not a scientist, you might not read it that way. And that's one of the important points we want to come onto a bit later on. But, okay, the headline of this is Journal Club, Why Do Some Children Lose Their Autism Diagnosis? Now, I would probably suggest you go and read this article before listening to our comments on it, just so you can understand what we're talking about, because there will be certain bits we pick out and talk about.
Yeah, it's quite a long article.
It is quite lengthy.
And you need to really kind of pay attention to it to understand it.
Yeah,
I would say I found it quite hard to read.
Yeah, so if you're not into kind of the scientific aspect, then feel free not to read it, but just bear that in mind as we move forward. So basically, it covers this study which was published at the beginning of October, saying that they studied 213 children who were diagnosed with autism between the ages of 12 and 36 months, and that it found that 79 of them, which was just over a third, no longer met the criteria when they were between 5 and 7. Okay, so it covered like a 4-year period. So they use this phrase, non-persistent autism, to describe children, in this case between the ages of 1 and 3, getting diagnosed as autistic and then them losing or not meeting the criteria later on. So the idea that they seem to be trying to point to is that one can grow out of autism, which obviously we know is complete rubbish.
Yes.
So why do they use that phrase, non-persistent autism? Now, there could be a couple of reasons. One of which I'm quite fond of is that between the ages of 1 and 3 is far too early to start diagnosing people with a neurodevelopmental disorder. Because how can you have a developmental disorder when your brain hasn't developed yet?
Yeah.
Like, I was deaf until I was 3, so technically I was non-verbal throughout that entire time.
Yeah.
And yet, I mean, I am also autistic, but that's probably a bad example. But I'm just saying, my parents didn't notice I was deaf until I was about 2. So how can you possibly just look at a 1-year-old, an 18-month-year-old, and go, yeah, autistic?
Yeah, well, as we were saying earlier, a lot of autistic behaviours rely on people's interaction with other people and the outside world to be obvious.
Yeah.
Which only happens when children kind of enter primary school age, which would be more like the 4 to 7 kind of bracket, 5 to 7.
So that's one reason. And then the other reason is that, as we said, between the ages of 5 and 7, that's when you start going to school, start interacting with other people, and that's when the masking starts.
Yes.
So one thing this makes painfully clear to point out is that 61% of the girls observed did not meet the criteria for autism at that second time mark. So between 5 and 7 years. But as we know, autism is so stereotypically a boys' thing, and the bias is such to the point that girls and non-binary folk are so woefully misdiagnosed with a whole host of other disorders, like depression, anxiety, borderline personality disorder, bipolar, basically anything but autism, because people think it's just a boys' thing.
Yep.
I mean, comparatively, it was about half that number, so 32% of the boys in the study didn't meet that criteria. And then one of the other factors that came into play was, it's a bit of a nasty phrase, but this idea of cognitive function.
Yes.
So this article says that, those with lower cognitive function, I don't like the phrase either, were more likely to keep showing the signs of autism as they developed, whereas those with higher cognitive function were more likely to not show those signs. But again, that basically just suggests to us that certain people are better at masking than others.
Yeah, I mean, it also says, I've just reread this and it's annoyed me slightly, where it says that the relationship between autism diagnosis and cognitive functioning, though somewhat complex, raises the age-old question of whether autism can span the entire range of intellectual ability. And in that case, the person's talking about a study that her and her colleagues did on 2-year-olds with autism and low cognitive functioning. They expected some of them would lose the autism diagnosis but retain a diagnosis of intellectual disability. But actually, virtually all of them retain their diagnosis of autism. And that whole little section there just really screams like only dumb kids can be autistic.
Yeah.
If they're smart, they can't possibly be autistic.
And that's where some of that kind of built-in ableism comes in.
It's also saying that a lot of the participants that were in the initial study that they talk about, where some of them lost their autism diagnosis, come from white and affluent families whose mothers had higher educational levels. So once again, they're coming from more well-off backgrounds with, they're likely going to be kind of more educated or encouraged to be more educated. So it's like they lose their diagnosis because they're clever.
Alternatively, they are treated better when they're younger.
Yeah. Yeah, because the family can afford it.
Also, if they're young and white, there's not a lot of racism headed their direction.
No, exactly. I mean, you could also argue that if they've got more affluent parents who are more educated, that they could even be more pressured to mask because behaving in an autistic way isn't appropriate for well-off, posh people.
But I think the big thing, which we haven't got onto yet, and this is where it's going to get spicy, folks. So this article mentions that the paper it's reviewing didn't mention that, in this case, out of the 213 participants, 197 of them received some sort of interventional therapy, which was primarily ABA, which is Applied Behavior Analysis. And if you're autistic and you are aware of what ABA is, then you'll see we've got a bit of a problem here.
Yeah. I think for those that
Where do we start?
have not heard of ABA before...
Congratulations, you don't live in the US.
Yeah, but just to make you aware of it and why this is a problem, ABA is essentially a form of behavioural therapy that relies on kind of positive and negative reinforcement strategies when children behave in a certain way in response to a certain cue. So if a child is autistic and they exhibit an autistic behaviour in response to a cue, they can be punished for that.
Yeah, so let's talk stimming.
Yeah.
Meltdowns.
Yeah.
Wanting to leave a room because it's too noisy or bright.
Yeah.
Curling up in a corner because everything's getting too much. Those sorts of things we may want to do or need to do every so often. They go, no, no, no. No comfort.
No.
Only pain. No food for you.
Yeah. It can range, like the negative reinforcement ranges in kind of extremity from probably, telling off to withholding comfort items, withholding food, to the extreme end of like physical punishment.
Yeah.
Like actual kind of,
Like
I won't say it outright because I don't know whether it's
aggressive restraint.
Yeah.
We'll call it.
Yeah.
I've only kind of mostly read of accounts of this from the US, so I'm not quite sure how widespread it is worldwide. I don't think it happens so much in the UK. At least I haven't heard of it happening so much in the UK. But just due to we'll call it inconsistency of medical standards in the US, it can range from like play-based kind of positive stuff, which for the most part is all right because it just encourages certain behaviors. It's more about teaching social skills. But it can range, and the original use of ABA was electroshock therapy. So you do anything that's autistic, zap. Which is not dissimilar to how they used to treat gay people back in the day.
Yeah.
So we're just going to leave that with you for a moment, because one bit of sentence I'm just going to read out from this article. It says, in fact, I might have concluded that the high prevalence of non-persistent autism and the high usage of ABA therapy in their sample serves as evidence for the effectiveness of ABA. Now, if you're reading this as a non-scientist and you don't know about the history and practice of ABA, how are you going to read that? You're going to read that it's effective and is good.
Yeah.
It makes no mention of, the potential abuses and trauma that so frequently happen. Like you mentioned, you found a statistic earlier. You've got it there.
I've got it prepared.
Yeah, you've
don't
got it
you
prepped.
worry.
Good.
So they were looking into, like
who's they? Just for accountability.
I've got this on Emerald Insight. So it was actually published, I think, in January 2020. And it just talks about different types of intervention for autistic kids and how that affects their lifespan and over their lifetime, basically. So you've got ABA, no intervention at all, other types of intervention like psychotherapy, things like that. And the reported post-traumatic stress symptoms that those people exhibited following the intervention. And a couple of quotes to read are, autistic people who received no intervention had a 59% lower likelihood of meeting the post-traumatic stress symptom criteria when compared to their ABA peers. ABA recipients were 1.74 times more likely to meet post-traumatic stress symptom criteria. And it does also say that an interesting connection I think I made with it is that within the 23% who selected an intervention other than ABA, so psychotherapy, like mental health counselling, blah, blah, 63% of them were asymptomatic. So that's a bit of a difficult sentence to figure out, but what I'm taking it as is that possibly...
maybe it was asymptomatic of PTSD.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah, because I think they're talking about that. So, yeah, it suggests that the majority of people that didn't have ABA and they had other intervention were asymptomatic of PTSD.
Yeah. So the thing I'm taking from that is, compared to ABA, doing literally nothing is better.
Yeah, well, there's this quote at the end. Although not generalisable beyond the scope of this study, it is indicated from the data that autistic people who received no intervention at all fared best over their lifetimes, which says just leave them to it.
Yeah, it says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, just don't try and train them out of behaviours.
So, let's shift back a little bit.
Yeah.
So, as we said, if you read this article, not being kind of the scientific minds that we are, and like not knowing much about ABA at all, and seeing it on like Spectrum News, which is for the most part fairly decent in terms of reporting like autism news and research, you would read that and go, "Oh, okay,
Yeah. ABA must be good."
yeah." You'd show it to your children and go, "See, you can grow out of autism.
Yeah.
There's science says you can. You can't be autistic because you're smart." It backs up so many negative stereotypes that we're trying so hard to like get over.
Yeah. Whereas if you just look at something else, says actually people who receive ABA are almost twice as likely to meet post-traumatic stress symptom criteria.
Yeah. Yeah, this is written as very much a paper review.
Yeah.
And from a very scientific, statistics-based background. But if you want to read personal accounts of people who have been through ABA, have a look on the autism subreddit. It's like the pinned post at the top of it. It's just talking about ABA therapy. Just have a look through.
Yeah.
If you have a child or you know someone considering it, look at the accounts of people who have been through it, because it's pretty horrific. And like some of them say positive things about their experiences, but I think even if it was if there was a 10% chance of lifelong trauma, I'd be like, no thanks.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Like doing
Insane.
doing nothing at all is better than putting like someone you're supposed to care about through ABA. Just remember that.
Yeah. And as you said, the techniques they use kind of similar to how they used to treat gay people. And we all know what the results of that are like, and it doesn't change anything that's going on inside. It just makes you hide it.
No, exactly. And that's one of the things we haven't mentioned yet, is just that ABA, it may teach autistic kids to not present outwardly, but it doesn't stop them suffering like their sensory issues. It doesn't stop the sun being too bright or the music being too loud, or like the feel of like the fabric on their skin kind of feeling like sandpaper. It doesn't stop any of that. It just stops them talking about it, which is the entire point of mental health.
Yeah.
Because if you can't talk about what you're having trouble with, then that's how we get to places that we can't necessarily talk about without censorship.
Yep.
It's one of those ones where we've just got to say, be careful about what you read.
Yeah.
Question what you read. Look up the sources of what you read.
Yeah.
And if someone shows you something, like a news article, you have to go, okay, where does this information come from?
Don't just trust one person.
No,
Because people have opinions.
yeah, and don't just trust us either. Like, that's why we're putting
Yeah.
references for everything we talk about, so you can read it for yourself, see what you think. But I think that's probably enough to be getting on with. Whew, that was a bit of a spice. I need a drink after that. Hang on.
I need some milk. That's a reference. If anyone knows it from I don't even know how long ago it was now. The sense of time is distorted.
Okay.
He needs some milk.
But yeah, so that was our discussion on ABA. If you have any strong opinions, one way or another, let us know. Give us a shout on Instagram @TheAutisticExperience, where you can find all sorts of things like show reminders and the references to everything we talk about on here, so it saves you some Googling. Very useful. But it's now time to move on to our question of the week. So this is the portion of the show where we scour Reddit for an internet rando's personal issues.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So this question says, anyone confused what counts as friends, best friends and all that. I mean, it's not like I don't have fun with other people. Though when others ask if XYZ are my friend, I just don't know what to answer that with. I used to call some people I really like my best friend back then, but often after I do, it feels like it would break apart not long after, so I just don't know. I just stopped using it once I was in high school or late middle school, so this sounds like an American thing, personally. I might know someone, refer to them as a classmate or something, but iffy if I'll call them friend, because it feels like people do a lot more together than what I have with others. So, this sounds to me like a classic case of judging ourselves by other people's standards. Because one of the questions I was asked as part of my autism assessment is like, what would you consider a friend?
Yeah.
And I think I answered like something along the lines of someone I'm like agreeable to and perhaps like see a bit more or know in more of a social setting.
Yeah.
Which was a very formal way of saying it, which probably helped get me the diagnosis. But it is very easy just to get confused about what constitutes friends. Because, yeah, this person's right, you know, we are very much used to being on the outside of social things because we don't fit into them. And we do see a lot of other people going out and doing a lot more things with other people. And if you go, okay, that must be what friendship is like. So when we go, okay, I don't have any of that, do I not have any friends?
I feel very called out.
Part of the idea of the podcast. It's calling you out personally.
Yeah, I do feel. I do that a lot when I see people walking around or going to each other's houses and they're in groups that you can just tell are just friend groups. And I'm like, why am I doing that? Not that I don't want to.
Well, because the thing is, like, one of the comments said, like, friends are people you can unmask and be yourself around.
Yeah.
And I think that does get to the heart of it if you kind of carry on that thought a bit more into that, yeah, okay, so if we say that friends are people we can unmask and be ourselves around, then historically, people we've tried to unmask and be ourselves around often reject us or ridicule us or bully us. And so it makes us quite prone to trust issues. So then we don't want to drop our guard, drop the mask around other people, and that makes forming friendships difficult. And also, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago with the double empathy problem, if we do drop our mask and try and be ourselves, then it comes across as weird and people don't want to put the effort in or, you know, provide that empathy back to us to try and make that connection.
Yeah, it's a really interesting issue to think about. Because I also personally don't get very attached to other people. Like, it takes a lot for me to meet somebody and think I actually really actively like this person.
Well, again, sorry, I just had a train of thought
that was what
reconnect.
I was gonna say.
Oh, that's good. Because if we're saying that a friend is someone we can unmask and be around, if, you know, we need those deep friendships to kind of get to that point, and if like another person or we can't put in the amount of effort to be able to reach that point, then we go, what's the point? I'm not going to get super involved with this person if it's just not going to go anywhere, right?
Yeah, and it was on the tip of my tongue and then I felt it. I felt it slinking away into the depths of my brain with a little cheeky grin on its face going, no, you're not having this thought.
Not today.
Ugh.
What do we say to the ADHD brain?
Yeah.
Not today.
It's like the goblins just grab the thought and gone,
That's precious.
It's come back now.
Okay. Gave it back.
Yeah.
Say it before you forget.
He heard me talking about it and he was like, fine, you can have this one. I think a lot of people, I know I do, and I think a lot of other people suffer from, I don't know the technical term, but if you don't feel like you get enough from other people, then you're really quick to kind of put up a defense and go, right, forget it then. Like I'm very much like that. If I'm in touch with people who are kind of friends or acquaintances and I don't really feel like they're that bothered about me, or that bothered about kind of keeping up with me, then I will just immediately disconnect and go, right, well, there's no point then, is there? Because they
Yeah.
obviously don't care.
Yeah, that sounds to me like a form of rejection sensitivity dysphoria,
Yeah.
where, if something goes wrong or someone like is seen to reject us, then our brain just goes, nope, okay, defense is
Yeah.
right up,
that's
like
it.
the walls are the portcullis is up.
Yeah.
Pull up the drawbridge, aim the cannons. This is like fight or flight mode, basically.
And then the problem is, it's like people might be busy, but then I go, that's it. I'm not bothered anymore then, because you obviously don't care. And then you just sort of fall out of contact completely. And it's like a self-fulfilling thing, isn't it, really?
Yeah, does not help anything.
No.
I think the best advice we could give for that is try not to judge yourself by other people's standards, because our brains don't work like that.
Yeah.
Put it this way, we've got a very limited amount of social energy. Would you prefer to use more of it on fewer people or a teeny tiny amount on more people?
Yeah. Exactly.
I think we can probably leave it at that. So, here is the part of the show where we look forward to the next week for events happening in and around the UK. So, if you're listening in the week past the 29th of October, you can probably just stop listening now.
There could be some super good jokes so that you can
Yeah,
miss
there
out
could
on.
be. Who knows? You don't want to necessarily miss out, do you?
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm just saying it might not be super relevant if you're listening past the week we're covering, or specifically the dates, the 23rd and the 28th of October, because those are the 2 dates I've got stuff happening for. Okay, so this first one is happening on the 23rd, so this is actually tomorrow, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. at the Museum of English Rural Life.
Ooh. How posh.
This is in Reading. It's called Museums My Way, which are theme sessions for neurodivergent visitors of all ages. And apparently it's free to go to. So I think the idea is that they've got reduced volume of gallery interactive sounds. There's sensory backpacks and ear defenders, breakout spaces, themed facilitated hands-on activities, themed gallery trail, and all activities are optional and you can visit at any point within the event times.
Very nice.
Again, good accessibility.
Yeah.
We approve. So it says, at the Museum of English Rural Life, the free bookable sessions take place on selected Mondays when the museum is usually closed to the public or are less busy.
The dream.
Yeah. Pretty ideal. So you can go to merl.reading.ac.uk or just search Museums My Way Reading. Maybe that would probably do it for you. Reading is spelled the same way as reading.
I was about to say that.
Just in case you were wondering. So, moving on to the 28th. So that's this coming Saturday. We've actually got 3 things for you for this Saturday. I've learned my lesson from last week and not putting everything on the Monday. So, this one is one of those National Trust ones. So, I think this is pretty solid. So, this is relaxed early opening at Newark Park. So, Newark Park is Watton under Edge in Gloucestershire.
Ah.
So basically the idea is that on the 28th, Newark Park is going to open an hour earlier, like supermarkets sometimes do for slightly quieter times. So if you want to go down an hour early when it's pretty much closed to everyone else, you can do. There's no need to book, but normal admission does apply because it is still a National Trust property and they got to get their money, as the site says.
Money.
It
Yeah,
says
word for word.
Yeah, we got to get our money. They spelled it M-U-N-A-Y.
Money.
Yeah, money. Never quite the same since the new people took over.
They're very modern now, aren't they?
They are.
These
They're
National Trusts.
a bit too modern, personally. But then also on the Saturday, the 28th of October, in Perth, which, contrary to popular belief, is in Scotland, not Australia. So if you've travelled to Australia for this, whoopsie. So this is Club Diversity Tabletop Gaming Community Club. So this is for young adults. It says the minimum age is 8, and young people under 14 must be accompanied by a participating adult or carer, but you can also turn up if you're over 14 as well. So it's either a £1 or £2 entry fee, depending on how old you are. And the idea is basically, you just turn up and play some tabletop games, which is going to be quite fun. Apparently they've got some of their own, or you can bring yours if you really fancy. So it's just an opportunity to turn up and play some tabletop games with people of your own brain.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah. And if there's anything I know about the TTRPG community, is that there's quite a lot of us in it already. So you want to start playing D&D in Perth, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
All right, our final event for you tonight, also again on the 28th, the Saturday of October. I said that in a really weird way, but we'll just move on. Is Autism Champions Live. Now, this is not a boxing thing, despite on how it sounds.
It does sound like that.
So let me see if I can read.
And now, entering the cage.
Who will be the champion of autism? Beat each other to death with trains.
It's a new WWE wrestler, like the Autism Champion.
Okay, let me read out this description. It says, join us as we tackle issues of vulnerability, puberty, sex, and mental health amongst autistic people and its impact on families and the self-imposed ostracism, isolation amongst ethnic minority communities. So the important thing to point out in this one is that it is very much hosted and geared to ethnic minorities, which do have a difficult enough time as it is.
Yeah.
But in terms of autism and ADHD and other neurodivergences, like similar to women, they have a disproportionate lack of support compared to, white dudes. This is down in London, by the way. I probably should have mentioned that right off the top. This is at St John's Bosco College in southwest London between 2:30 and 5 in the afternoon. It does seem to be free to go to, should you so wish. So that's pretty solid. If you're part of any relevant community, then I'm sure it would be a fascinating spot to go to. And I'm like, I think probably if we were down in London then or lived in London, it would be worth going to that.
Mm-hmm. We like to see the inclusivity, don't we?
Yeah. But that's all for your event fix for this week. And in fact, it's the end of the show.
Oh no.
I'm sure you said out loud along with us.
With tears.
Yeah, with tears streaming down your face. They're like, oh no, I've got to wait another week. But fear not. The week will be over before you know it.
It will.
It will.
And also, you can listen to all the previous ones if you want.
That's true.
Segue.
You can go back and listen to all the previous ones should you have missed out on any. Or you want to go through them again. Who's to say you wouldn't?
Tide you over for the next one.
Yeah. And in the meantime, of course, you can go and look at any articles or whatever we've talked about via the references on our Instagram page, which is at The Autistic Experience. As we said, if you're one of those people who like to listen to podcasts on YouTube nowadays, I'm sure there are plenty of people like that, then you just search The Autistic Experience podcast on either YouTube or YouTube Music, and you should be able to find us. You can, of course, leave a nice rating and review on whatever podcast platform you happen to be listening on, or also just comment, go find us on Instagram and comment on the post with all the show stuff, what you thought of it. It's nice to start up a little bit of discussion should you want to shout at us for any particular reason. Now, next week's show may be a little shorter than normal, or slightly more chaotic, or not as rigorously edited as normal, simply because we are travelling back home for my sister's wedding.
Hey!
Which is happening kind of in midweek, so our recording and especially editing schedule might get a bit confused, let's say. But that's not an issue for you, and it's not an issue for us right now. So we'll let future us take care of that. But for now, I think it's probably about time we headed off and for you to go get that free lunch.
Adieu.
Adieu.